Michael, what's today's audio topic?
Today we're reviewing SHANLING's R2R DAC, the EH2.
That's the R2R DAC everyone's been talking about lately. Master, you want to hear about SHANLING's EH2 too, right?
Yes, I want to hear.
By the way, what exactly is an R2R DAC?
You already forgot?
Sorry, I'm forgetful.
I explained it passionately when we covered TX-UD701N. Well, let's briefly review R2R DACs. There are two main methods for converting digital signals to analog in a DAC, delta sigma conversion and R2 or ladder conversion. The delta sigma method is used in most modern DAC chips. It performs pulse density modulation, switching between 0 and 1/10 of millions of times per second at ultra-high speed, creating an analog waveform based on the density variations. The advantage of the delta sigma method is that it relies less heavily on resistor precision and excels at precisely reproducing the high dynamic range found in modern high-resolution audio sources. The disadvantage is that it requires extremely complex calculations, which can generate noise and a calculated sounding quality during the computation process. The other method is the R2 or ladder method. This is a classic technique that combines two types of resistors, R and 2R, in a ladder-like configuration. The mechanism involves weighting the signal value before performing direct conversion. The advantage of R2R is its extremely simple signal processing, resulting in very fast sound attack, powerful output, and a sound described as having a sense of presence. The disadvantage is the requirement for resistors of extremely high precision. Even slight errors directly translate into sound distortion. Achieving modern high-resolution standards like 24-bit necessitates using high-precision resistors in series, which increases cost. The EH2 introduced here is a distinctive desktop DAC that compactly condenses the smooth sound and driving power of the R2R method.
What's the price of the EH2?
About $400, making it an entry-level model. Devices equipped with R2R DACs were once synonymous with high-end stationary audio systems. However, in recent years, technological miniaturization has advanced, enabling them to be offered across an extremely wide price range, from portable units costing a few $100s to high-end models exceeding $5,000. Now let's talk about the EH2. Starting with its size, 156 by 150 by 36.5 millimeters, it's incredibly compact. Placing it next to the included AC adapter really shows how compact the unit is. It might be the smallest audio device I've ever used. Included accessories are the AC adapter, a USB-C to USB-A cable, a Bluetooth antenna, and a headphone adapter plug. There's no remote control. I used the EH2 as a desktop unit, but this size feels more natural for keeping it close at hand on your desk. Now, let's go over the front panel. From left to right, 4.4mm balanced and 6.35mm single-ended headphone jacks, gain switch, source selector switch. Center, volume control, bass adjustment dial, treble adjustment dial, power switch. One interesting feature I noticed while using it is how the LEDs around the volume control change color based on the sampling frequency. Blue for 44.1 kHz, green for 96 kHz, and so on. The EH2 doesn't have a display, but this gives you the essential info. You can also choose between line output and preamp output, allowing you to bypass the volume and tone controls. Now, let's cover the rear panel. The back has a 12 volts DC power input, USB-C, optical and coaxial digital inputs, and a Bluetooth antenna jack. A distinctive feature of the EH2 is the filter switch. It allows switching between oversampling and non-oversampling modes.
I've never heard of non-oversampling.
Then let me explain oversampling, OS, and non-oversampling, NOS. But first, let's review the R2R DAC again. The R2R method directly generates voltage using resistor combinations. It converts each bit of a PCM signal, like 44.1 kHz, 16-bit, into voltage, sums them, and outputs analog. This calculation is simple. Theoretically, it can convert the input PCM signal directly into voltage. This as-is quality is why it pairs well with NOS. Now, about non-oversampling, NOS. NOS outputs the input PCM signal at exactly its original sampling rate, e.g., 44.1 kHz remains 44.1 kHz, without any upsampling, converting it directly via the R2R ladder to analog. The technical characteristic of NOS is that it uses no digital filters or only minimal ones. This results in imaging noise, aliasing components, appearing in the high frequencies. The analog LPF is also quite gentle. The sound tendency of NOS is natural and analog-like. It's often described as having a soft attack. Additionally, it has a long decay and is less fatiguing to listen to. The high frequencies can sometimes feel slightly rounded or darker. While many people find it musical and atmospheric, its measured values like SN ratio and THD tend to be less favorable. Next, oversampling OS. The OS mechanism involves upsampling the input PCM signal by several to dozens of times using a digital filter. It then performs R2R conversion at a higher sampling frequency. For example, 8 times upsampling from 44.1 kHz to 352.8 kHz. A key technical feature of OS is that imaging noise is pushed out of the audible range, eliminating the need for steep analog filtering. It also tends to produce a flatter frequency response. The sound tendency of OS is extended highs, high resolution, and rich information content. The soundstage is sharp, resulting in a modern, monitor-like sound. It tends toward a sound similar to Delta Sigma DACs, but often retains the characteristic density and thickness typical of R2R. Since OS is closer to the traditional Delta Sigma method, NOS can be said to embody the characteristics of R2R.
Isn't the sound better with oversampling?
That's true. Not oversampling is the classical approach.
But NOS still has its supporters, right?
There are 3 reasons NOS is favored. First, compatibility with circuit philosophy. The beauty of R2R is that it doesn't compute. Adding complex digital filters there makes it indistinguishable from Delta Sigma. That's why it handles the raw PCM signal as is. Second, natural phase characteristics. NOS has no pre-ringing, so the attack of percussion, piano, and vocals tends to sound more natural.
Pre-ringing?
Pre-ringing is the phenomenon where a small signal occurs before the actual sound plays.
That happens?
In the physical world, a signal appearing before the sound shouldn't happen. But with digital filtering, it happens for mathematical reasons. The cause is linear phase digital filters. Oversampling increases the sampling frequency and applies a steep low-pass filter to remove noise components. This filter has a symmetrical impulse response. This causes small signals to appear before and after the actual signal. This muddies the attack sound.
I see. Since a R2R doesn't oversample, it doesn't produce pre-ringing signals.
Third, for users prioritizing auditory perception over measurements. Those choosing R2R DACs often seek musicality over numbers and pleasantness over precision. Conversely, OS suits those demanding high resolution, wide dynamic range, and precise imaging. This is why recent R2R DACs offer OS and OS switching. While more digital processing can feel more precise, some people feel it sacrifices musical naturalness.
I see. Michael, which did you prefer with the EH2, NOS or OS?
I prefer NOS. As I just explained, listening in OS mode gives me an impression not too different from Delta Sigma conversion. So, to truly leverage the EH2's characteristics, I think NOS is where the real value lies. Switching between OS and NOS is easy with the rear panel switch, so I think it's good to use whichever suits your mood. Now, continuing with the rear panel, there's the 4.4mm balanced output, RCA output, and the line out, pre-out selector switch. One thing to note is the narrow spacing between the RCA jacks. My Gord GCR 600 just barely fit. Given the chassis size, it might not be intended as a serious audio component for dedicated listening.
How does the actual EH2 sound?
It's my first time using an R2R DAC, and it sounds different from Delta Sigma DACs. In NOS mode, the resolution drops, but it produces a smoother, more mellow sound. You could say it's a DAC that emphasizes atmosphere. In OS mode, the resolution increases, but the sound feels a bit bland and lacking character.
So, after trying the R2R method this time, how does it compare to the Delta Sigma method you've used before?
The R2R DAC definitely has a distinctive sound, but whether it sounds better than the Delta Sigma method is a bit tricky to say.
I see.
Next, let's compare it to the SMCell SUX DAC, which uses the ESS DAC chip I'm using and employs the Delta Sigma method.
Everyone, closing time is approaching.
Master, can you extend closing time?
That's impossible. Impossible.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, please subscribe to the channel.